Well, good morning, everyone. Today is October 1st, and this is the um, every 2-year request for proposal conference, RFP conference for the 2026 through 2028 RFP and fiscal years. My name is Jody Barker, and I'm the director of the Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging. And so um, uh, just wanted to welcome those of you who are with us today. And for those of you in the room, just a little bit of housekeeping. Restrooms are down the hall, coffee is on the stand, help yourself. We will ask that you hold any potential federal shutdown questions until after the full RFP conference and Q&A portion is completed. So please hold any questions that you might have until the very end. For those of you who are here who are current contracted providers, please be watching for an email out from me, most likely late this afternoon or tomorrow morning, as we do have a state meeting with all AAAs late this afternoon. And so once we have a better sense of the state's plans, we will be sharing that out with current contracted providers. This RFP process that we're going to be talking through today, though, is not affected by the current federal shutdown. The process will continue so that we can work toward planning to have contracts ready to go for July 1 of next year. So real briefly, I'm going to ask staff in the room who are here to present to introduce themselves, and then we will get started. So again, my name is Jody Barker. I'm the director of the Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging. We are housed here at the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, PPACG. Noemi?
Noemi Estella. I'm the staff accountant in the finance department.
Carol McBroom, PPACG Finance Director.
Amruta Desai, I'm the Senior Staff Accountant at PPACG.
Jed Solid, Compliance Specialist.
Good morning, Melody Hanna, Associate Director.
Great, thank you very much. I do want to recognize we also have another staff member who's sitting in with us. Kendra, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Kendra Carpenter with the Family Caregiver Support Center here at the Area Agency on Aging.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And as usual, we have Jared Werner behind me, our communications and legislative staff are here running our audio visual. So I would highly recommend, because we are recording this, if you want to have a staff member who could not join you today, watch that. Just be watching for that recording. You can request that from Melody or myself. We will make sure you get a copy of that. So if you have finance staff or other staff that you think may need to hear what we share today, please be watching for that opportunity to share the recording. So why are we here? We're here to talk about the process of distributing funds that are administered through the Older Americans Act and the Older Coloradans Act into our 3-county region. Our service region is El Paso County, Teller County, and Park County. However, not all services may be offered across all 3 counties. Our role is to collaborate with the funds that are distributed, to work with community providers, service providers, who can then enable those services across the 3 counties. So services may look differently from one county to the next, and that's wholly dependent on the contractors that we're able to engage with across the region. So the Older Americans Act was signed into law in 1964 as part of the Civil Rights Act, also signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson. So if you're looking at your history and you wonder how did this come about, that's how this was started. In 1973, the Older Coloradans Act was written into law and signed as part of continuation of that service distribution from the federal level all the way down into the states. And so just a couple years ago, we celebrated our 50th anniversary of providing Older Coloradans Act and Older Americans Act services in these 3 counties. So how did the funds and how do the programs make their way from the federal government down to these 3 counties within Colorado? We have Administration for Community Living Oversight, which is a department under the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. And within the CDHHS, the Administration for Community Living now resides under the Administration on Children, Youth, and Families. That is new this year. So we have quite a mouthful to process when we talk about how our funds make it from the federal government down to our region. Through the Administration for Community Living and then the Children, Youth, and Families Division at the federal level, those programs and funds then make their way into each state, and each state houses a state unit on aging that is usually within the Department of Human Services, but that even varies from state to state. But within the state of Colorado, it does reside within our Colorado Department of Human Services. That state unit on aging then distributes the funding by funding formula, and provides the program oversight relative to the Older Americans Act and the Older Coloradans Act across the state of Colorado. Now, we are just one of 16 AAAs across the state of Colorado. In turn, we're able to serve every county in the state of Colorado by having 16 area agencies on aging. So the state unit on aging is our program and finance oversight. Ultimately that the state unit on aging does provide the oversight of the programs, the funding, and ultimately the compliance relative to the Older Americans Act and the Older Coloradans Act. So we'll move into talking a little bit more now about the funding. Funding has been challenging over the last several years. We had a beautiful uptick in funding. During COVID, it was one of those pewter linings, silver linings that people talk about. We had additional funds. We had increased changes in how we could manage the funds. But when that emergency declaration was rescinded, we did return to the standards of the Older Americans Act and the Older Coloradans Act. Overall, our direct funding has reduced over the last several years. Some of that is because of the emergency funding that was one time and went away. Some of that was homestead tax exemption funding that had come to the AAAs across the state, and that funding has terminated as well. From state fiscal year 25 into state fiscal 26, that funding is down from last year. So our starting number that we will use as our estimate to move forward with the RFP process, the contracting process, and planning has gone down since last year. For those of you who had not heard a couple of my presentations here recently with our Regional Advisory Council or perhaps with our Board of Directors, it did translate to a 1.73% reduction year over year. That translates to just under $104,000. We were able to manage that reduction in funds through budgeting and changing some of our programs internally, which did in turn, when we did get our funding, that allowed us to bring our contracted providers to flat funding year over year. So we were very happy to be able to provide that from a delicate budgeting standpoint, but just know that we need to be able to plan and expect likely less funding or at a minimum flat funding in this coming fiscal year. So as we think of the funding, we also think of how we're going to manage the possibility of flat funding or a reduction in funding. And we have to do that by looking at the priorities in our core services mandated under the Older Americans Act. So as we continue through this RFP process, please be thinking about that as you apply, as you complete your application and your funding estimates, your budgeting. Please know that we as staff, our TRS, that's our Technical Review Subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the Regional Advisory Council or the RAC, will be taking a hard look at all services and determining priorities based on the connections to the Older Americans Act and the mandates under the Older Americans Act. As I mentioned, because of the timeline, we do use estimated numbers, which we will use this current year's numbers that started July 1 as our estimated numbers, so that we can continue working through our committee and board approval process here. We use what we've come to call a contingency vote process, which allows us to go through the committee and board approval process with those estimated numbers. And then when we receive the real numbers, we provide a final update for approval from our board of directors. As we begin to review the RFPs, and I won't steal Melody's thunder because this is a big part of what she'll be doing, but as we begin to review those requests for proposals for programs, it's not just staff making the decisions, although we will bring recommendations, and we will join in a meeting with the TRS. As I mentioned, that's the Technical Review Subcommittee, that subcommittee of the RAC. And the TRS will also have opportunity to review all of the RFPs, the budgets, the recommended or the requested funding. And we'll have a joint meeting then, where we will take their input as members of the public. We will also take their input to services. And through the RFP, you noticed that there is a scoring system in there. They will also be taking opportunity to score as they review those, and all of that will be taken under consideration with the TRS as we determine funding recommendations. Because we have to do this from an estimate standpoint, just so you know why we do that, we don't really anticipate knowing our funding allocation until May. Generally, April or May, we'll start getting estimates of our funding allocation, with hard numbers usually in May. And so this allows us to continue through the contracting process, the planning process, the recommended allocation process, and all the behind the scenes work that needs to be done in order to come to a July 1 contract date. So we will use these estimates, but once we receive the actual funding allocation from our state unit on aging, then we will begin to firm up those numbers. As I mentioned before, we will be reviewing requested programs through a priority system based on core services in the Older Americans Act. Once we have our real numbers from the state unit on aging, if we have to provide feedback to anyone who has been accepted as a contractor in the next 2-year funding cycle, if there are changes based on our funding allocation, we will be in communication with each provider individually so that we can tune that up and be prepared for the contract signing process. So we expect those funding allocations in May. Our goal is to have you have your contract signed by June 30th so that we can effectively begin with a July 1 start date of 2026, which is the state fiscal year 27. So Please be aware of that. We talk in state fiscal years, but we're also talking calendar dates. So please make sure that you're clear on that and don't hesitate to ask any questions about that. One last thing I want to do before I hand it over to our budget and finance requirements under our finance team is because of some recent updates in the Older Americans Act. There were recent regulation changes. Those are still in process. Our state unit is reviewing all of the recommended or the required changes under the Older Americans Act. Some are already in place, and so current providers are aware of those. However, there are still changes to come at the state level, and because of the state process, it will take between 1.5 to 2 years, so effectively at least 2 legislative cycles to update the Older Coloradans Act to match the federal Older Americans Act regulation changes. And so we've already begun updating the contract language. And so there will be some contract changes from the last contract into this new contract. So please, please, please be sure that you are reading those very carefully when your contract does come to you, typically early mid-June. So please be sure that you are reviewing those for those changes. Some are federal and or state regulations. We've changed some of our processes as well internally to ensure that we can be in compliance with our state and federal requirements, but also meet also our finance requirements as well. So with that, I'm going to invite Noemi and Amruta to share more about our budget and finance requirements under the contracting process.
Thank you. Jared, can you bring up the RFP budget revenue? Oh, thank you. All right, we'll start with the revenue portion of the budget. And this, as you can see, it includes grant funds being requested and also includes cash match and maybe even program income if that's applicable to you. These three, the grant funds, the cash match, and the program income add up to your total revenue number. And keep in mind, cash match is not included in that revenue total. Match is required, and you'll see examples here that we put together for you. So depending on your services rate requirement, your calculation is, for example, for 10% match, it's grant funds times 0.11111, or 25% is grant funds times 0.33333. Also, match is required on the total program cost or total revenue, so keep that in mind. Next slide, please. And this is the expense side. All the expenses need to be allowable under the grant, so make sure those are clearly listed in your budget. And don't use other or miscellaneous categories because everything needs to be clearly itemized. And most importantly, your expenses and your revenue, they need to be equal, so the budget needs to be balanced. You'll also see CPU calculation there. That's your cost per unit, and you don't have to worry about that because we calculate that for you. That's your total grant funding divided by the number of units of service your program will deliver. So that covers just the key points. Are there any questions? See one from Nick at Project Angel Heart.
Yes, thank you so much. Just one quick question for clarification around the CPU calculation. When you say total grant funding, is that our award size or is that the overall revenue for the program?
That is, That is per service. So if you have one service, does that answer your question?
No, so for example, if we look at the example on the left side of the screen, would the CPU calculation be based on, say the $10,000 of grant funds requested, or would it also include like the cash match, the program income, the overall budget?
Yeah, that to be specific, it is the total revenue number.
Okay. Okay. So when it says total grant funding, that's looking at everything, including what we're contributing to the program.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I'll turn it over to
It looks like Sally might have a question. Sorry to interrupt you.
New Vision.
Yes,
Sally,
I do have a question. Now, you said you will calculate the number of CPUs because in years past, we used to kind of calculate how many we thought we could deliver monthly. So I'm unclear on that.
Your final CPU is going to be calculated by us. So that's what we mean in that case.
Okay.
so Sally, you'll still determine the number of units that you're going to offer and the amount, the grant funding that you'll request. The grant funding will be determined through the TRS and our board of directors, and then depending on the final amount we get in the contract from the state. But as far as the number of units that you believe you can offer comparable to the total grant funding that you're requesting, that's the number that you'll put into your application.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Looks like Kelly, do you have a question as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to verify the provider cash match. That includes in kind, like volunteer time?
No, provider cash match does not include in kind. So in kind is non-cash match like volunteer or space provided or space donated. So these are cash dollars.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Jerry, do you see anyone else? Okay. All right, I'll turn it over to Amruta.
Thank you, Jared. This is Amruta, and I'm going to talk about some requirements for funded providers. The first one is prior approvals for fixed assets and capital expenditures. For any approvals on fixed asset purchases and capital expenditures, please contact Jody Barker. The second requirement is annual assessments. For annual assessment, I'm just going to give you a process that we follow. In our finance department, we select a specific month out of your already reimbursed months and prepare a worksheet for that month. Bellity usually sends it out to all the organizations to complete and return to us. The providers are required to complete the worksheet and send us the supporting documents that are for the expenses, program income, and match in a timely manner. We complete the assessment after we receive all the documents and worksheets. And if there are no issues, then we finally send out a formal letter informing the completion of the assessment. This is a deadline-oriented assessment, so we expect timely and accurate correspondence during assessments. The third requirement is reimbursement request due by 10th of the month by 4 p.m. So we require all the providers to enter the correct reimbursement units and amounts in SUDS and OASIS by 10th of each month by 4 p.m. If 10th is a holiday, then the submission deadline will be the next business day by 4 p.m. And if we do not receive it by the deadline, then the reimbursement will be held until the next month or following month. The fourth requirement is single audit. This is a financial audit that we go through under Federal Regulation 2 CFR 200. We are required to conduct this audit for all the non-federal entities if they have expended over $1 million in federal funds during a specific year. So I'll be sending an audit certificate form to all the providers sometime in June to complete, sign, and return. If your organization expends under $1 million in federal funds, then there will be no further documentation that will be required by us. If your organization expends over $1 million in federal funds, then we will require a copy of your organization's audited financial statements. If you have any more questions on requirements, please shoot it to me.
Were there any other finance questions or finance-related questions? Okay, we'll move on. I'm Melody Hanna, the Associate Director for the Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging, and I'm just going to cover briefly some deadlines and reminders. Thank you all for those of you attending in person and then online. Really appreciate your time. Just as a repeat and reminder from the request for proposals, we had the release and RFP system training this past week. You're here today for the conference. Thank you. It's mandatory for all applicants. We have a period where you can reach out and ask questions, and you can either do that by phone, by email, in person, whatever you'd prefer. And that time period was from the RFP release on September 19th through October 31st. So if you have any questions after today, after you've digested this information and have had time to go through the application, if you have any follow-up questions, please be sure to set a calendar reminder for yourself that October 31st is the deadline for that. And that's any questions around funding, technical questions with the RFP system, anything related to finance. So August 31st is the deadline for that. After that, we'll have a period of quiet. We won't be answering questions. You all will be hopefully wrapping up your application. So our proposals are due online November the 14th. That's a Friday. Those must be electronically signed and submitted via the RFP system by 11:59 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We do not accept emailed applications or paper applications. It must go through the online system. So please give yourself plenty of time. The system is set up to catch errors. You may have to work through some, whether that's related to you accidentally missed a narrative question or there's something that's not balancing in your budget. Please don't wait till the last minute if you run into an error in the system, because those errors I can help you with. So if you're going through it, you know how to correct, that's wonderful. If you're running into any problems, please don't hesitate to reach out. But unfortunately, that's going to have to be before October 31st, and we don't want you to miss that or run into encounter any errors that you're not able to fix yourself. So quick reminder about those deadlines within the system. As a reminder, for those of you who have used it before or for newcomers, you're required to utilize an agency registration code. And the purpose for that is if you have multiple people in your organization who are working on the application with you. So if you have your finance team that's working on the budget and you yourself are working on the narrative, the agency registration code ensures that you're not creating duplicate applications. We want to make sure that we just have one application per organization, but multiple people can work on it. You just have to set up your own login, and that's all included in the tutorial that was sent out with the request for proposals on September the 19th. So in the application, you'll see there's some required reading. There's a couple of updates to that from last time around dates. You'll see a description of the services. There's a section for required documentation that we expect you to have within the first 90 days of the start of the contract period. So that's going to be specific policies and procedures. You can reach out if you have any questions about that. And then there's a narrative section. We've got 26 questions this year. They're not all narratives, so that's good news. There's a mixture of the narrative and then yes, no responses. And if you have any questions about those narratives, again, please be sure to reach out before October 31st for those. Then you'll come across the budget section where you'll get to choose your services, and that's where you'll put in the number of units. So Sally, great question from you about that. You'll be able to put in the number of units you anticipate providing with the grant funding that you're requesting, and being able to include a description of what those services are. And you'll be able to demonstrate the need for those in the narrative questions. Those are all things that are reviewed by as Jody mentioned, our technical review subcommittee, and then our regional advisory council. So then there's a section to validate, and that's where the system catches any errors or anything you may have missed, and then you'll be able to submit. So you can always reach out to, you'll receive a verification that you're able to submit it and can print it at the end. But if you need to reach out to me just to verify that I've received it, I'm able to see that on my end once you've had that submitted. And I believe that's all I have for deadlines and reminders. Does anyone online or in the room have any questions? Or Jody, anything to add?
Thank you, Melody. That's great. A couple of things I do want to remind and provide a little bit of an update, as they have been conversations with our current providers, but new applicants may not be aware of this. So just want to make sure that you do have time to review the laws and legislation. First of all, there is an annual client survey that is done. The previous language and the Older Americans Act language does state that the individual providers or subcontractors will be engaged in that process from both an operational and a fiscal standpoint. We actually changed that internally several years ago, where the Pikes Peak Area Agency on Aging staff manages the process as well as the funding for that. Our goal was to reduce the administrative burden as well as the financial cost to put together and coordinate the satisfaction survey. It is our goal to continue that process, even with the reduction in funding. We feel that that is very important to have a centralized location for the surveys. You will have an opportunity, be watching for that from Melody, probably January or so, with the opportunity to add questions to the survey. You may do that. She will give you that opportunity, announcement, and deadline for submitting those. The State Unit on Aging under the Older Americans Act does have specific questions that must be asked, but we do have the opportunity to add. So we can't change, but we can add. But again, our goal is to continue funding that process. That's the printing, that's the stamps, that's the time, that's the people at the contractor who stuff all the different envelopes, because it goes to every single client, even those who've had multiple services. So they will receive multiple surveys based on the services that they received in the previous year. So just be aware that we do intend to continue that process and take on the financial and administrative burden of running that process to meet our state requirements. A new change that has we discussed this during the last contract period, but it has slowly gotten ironed out. But we have been able to confirm that the website accessibility or online accessibility legislation that was Colorado House Bill 21-1110. Again, that's House Bill 21-1110. Does require third parties or subsequent parties of federal and state funding to also be in compliance with these rules. So please make sure that you are aware of the requirements around that. They have a pretty good FAQ section on that website at the state. So please take a look at that and be aware of that, so that if you need to make changes to your online processes, your website processes, that you are meeting the requirements of that House Bill 21-1110. That's all I have for now. Melody, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add really quickly too, for those of you that are new to the process, this is a 2-year cycle, as Jody mentioned. So what that means is that this is the application process for 2 years, and that in the second year, what we'll ask you for is a budget and then send you an option letter. So we won't be going through this process again in a year, and just want to send that out as a reminder to everyone. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the bulk of what we needed to share with you around the RFP process, deadlines, funding, and budgeting. Wanted to open it up for general questions, and like I said, if you would hold off anything that may be related to the current federal shutdown, we will answer those towards the end. So we'll find a good break in there and then address that as well. So are there any general questions around the process, procedures, anything that we've talked about today? Just please use the raise hand function and we will call on you in turn. Well, all right. It's a quiet group, so that's okay. There's a lot to process. Those of you who have gone through this process will recognize there's not a lot of changes, but I will highlight again those deadlines. You heard Amruta share the 10th of the month by 4 p.m., not end of business, by the 10th by 4 p.m. And I do want to accentuate that. Because we are processing so many contract reimbursements each month, it is important to be on time. You can begin entering those entries even before the 1st, but immediately you can start doing those. You don't have to wait until the 10th to get those entered into the system. So wherever you're able to by that time in your process, please consider that. If it is not accurate and correct when it arrives, it will be held over for review and processing during the following months so that we can get everyone else processed and meet the state processing requirements and deadlines. Okay, no questions there. Are there any questions related to the government shutdown? The federal government shutdown? What I can tell you, instead of broad questions that I can't answer, let me tell you what I do know. Right now, because of the way that our federal programs and our funding are managed, we do have the buffer between us and the federal government programs at the state level. That is what we're going to hear more about today on director's call with the state directors. And so, like I mentioned, any particulars that come out of that, I will be sharing that across the network with current contracted providers. Again, this RFP process is an administrative process. It is not affected by our funding questions or the federal government shutdown at this time. So as we hear more, wanted to let you know that we are watching for this. We've asked for this conversation with the state so that we understand better how to plan. Our finance staff will be joining us on this call, and so that they are aware of the state plans as well. So because we do have the buffer, we don't anticipate any immediate changes. One thing that I would suggest, much as we did back in January, February, when the federal OMB letter around the potential closure of programs came about, and the state controller's office sent out a letter. Just watch your spending right now. Be very careful about your spending. Make sure that you have all the appropriate documentation for your spending. But programs at this stage will not be paused or held until we know more information or further information. So just know that we're staying very closely glued to the process and our state and federal administrators as well. All right, did that generate any questions? All right, Melody, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I think we are free to close this RFP conference for the fiscal years 27 and 28. And so I thank you everyone for being here. All right, Sagan, last second here. I see your hand. Go ahead, Sagan.
Hi, I'm sorry. So this question actually relates to the RFP. And I just want to make sure that I have accurate information for our finance director who wasn't able to attend. So for the budget, I was wondering, for our requested funds, do we request funding for 1 year or 2 years in our budget?
That's a great question, Sagan. And so Melody is going to answer that for you real quick.
Yeah, really good question, Sagan. Thank you for that. It's 1 year. And so since this will be a 2-year contract, we'll ask you in the second year ahead of time to submit another budget for the second year and then release those funds through an option letter. So for this budget, please make a request for 1 year of funding.
Thank you, Sagan. That's a really great question. For those of you who may not have been with us before or contracted with us before, while we operate on a 2-year contract cycle, that's purely a goal to reduce the administrative burden between the 2 years. As Melody mentioned, it's some communication back and forth, and then an option letter goes out to you. So it doesn't require you to start over again because effectively, given the process, we would go directly from signing a contract and then building the RFP process over again. While it is a 2-year contract cycle, our funding is a 1-year cycle, and that's why we ask you to build out just the 1 year, because that's how we have to operate coming from the state and the federal the 2 mandates. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, Melody and I are available for any questions that you may have. And again, keep in mind this October 31st deadline. This is to really encourage you, of course, to get things wrapped up, ask those questions, and then have the time. You'll notice, and I really wanted to thank our finance staff as well as Melody and Jen on our compliance, contracts and compliance, enabling this RFP process to start much earlier than we have in the past. Those of you who've been with us for a while know that you're still doing this at Thanksgiving. We made sure that we were done with your portion well ahead of the holidays so that you weren't in a pinch to wrap up. So if you have an opportunity, please recognize Melody, Jen, and our finance staff for making that happen. So we really want to thank them for that. So with that, we will close out this RFP conference for the 27-28 fiscal years, and we thank you very much for being here today. With that, we are adjourned.